Are we ready? Are we ready? It's time. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. That gets us to the day, right? So, a day with some shocking developments. I'm sure that by now you all heard that Corum very likely has lost its mast, so a lot going on there. And other than that, Hugo Boss and Jean Le Cam still strongly in the lead. The rest of the field slowly catching up to Jean. You know, the foiling boats just being faster on this particular wind direction, but Hugo Boss decidedly expanding the lead right now. So lots of interesting things to get to today, and a lot of people have liked the question already several times if I can talk about the different sail plans on board of the Moccas and kind of, you know, sail plans in general. So I'm going to spend some time on that, talking about, you know, the type of sails, the name of the sails, this type of things, so that when you hear me talk about things like J2s or A1s, or, you know, if you look into other reporting and they're constantly talking about these terms, so that you actually know what the heck they're talking about. So let's jump in and get started. So first things first, Nicolas Troussel was doing really well. Even if we look at the tracker right now, he's still in 8th place. So with his boat Corum, but yeah, unfortunately lost the mast. You know, probably in pretty strong weather. Most of the boats around him at the moment were doing, you know, 21, 22 knots. So they were really, you know, kicking the boats hard. And yeah, I guess unfortunately, you know, something happened, maybe overpowered the boat, maybe strong gusts. We don't exactly know yet. But apparently he's, you know, fallen out of the race. So no exact news yet about what's going to happen. Is he going to go in somewhere? His boat speed's been steady around 8 knots, so most likely he hasn't completely lost the mast, but is you know, sailing some kind of jerry rig right now. And yeah, we'll see what happens. I'll keep you apprised if there's new information available. So as you guys can see, we have Hugo Boss here in place number 1 still. Second, yes, we can with Jean Le Cam, but Linked Out and Apivia and also PRB are quickly catching up with Jean. Basically because, well, if we look at an average speed, we see that you know, most of the foilers are, oh, actually I see some lower average speeds here, but in general, you know, we see a lot of speeds 22, 21 knots and over, while Jean is basically pretty steady around 18. So, you know, with a 2 to 3 knots deficit on his part, which is just due to, you know, the fact that he has a non-foiling boat, you know, there's just no way that he's going to stay ahead as long as this weather stays so excellent for the foilers, really. At the same time, Hugo Boss really extending its lead. I think he's right now about 150 miles ahead of the next competitor, so pretty impressive. And for the rest of the fleet, we see that let's see, where is she? Yeah, so Sam Davis in 11th fell back a little bit. And then we see that we have a lot of boats racing really close together. Well, Corum, of course, not really racing anymore now. We have Bureau Valet 2, Omea, we have Group Apicil, and we have Maître Coq. And then we have pretty large space again, and then we have the rest of the field. So that's kind of where things are right now. And as far as the weather prediction goes, as I showed you guys yesterday, so running the prediction from right now, this is today, then tomorrow, and same for Wednesday. We can see that the prediction stays more or less very steady, very much the same. 10 to about 25 knots of wind for the sailors in more or less the perfect direction all through Tuesday, and Wednesday it's pretty much the same, Thursday same. So not really much to see or discuss there, but absolutely excellent for the racers. So they're just going to have basically this perfect weather condition until they reach the doldrums, which gives us time today to dive into some more technical stuff, and as I mentioned, to talk a little bit about the sails and about the sail plans. So I put some pen and paper here to make some drawings for you. So let's go into old Uncle Florian's drawing book, and I'll try to explain some stuff for those of you who maybe are not so familiar with that yet.
So starting up here, my sail configuration, I'm sailing with just a J2 and a J3 that we attach to these furlers here. And the forestay actually isn't going to have a sail permanently fixed to it because I don't need a jib that big. The boat's already quite overpowered upwind. So the J2 and the J3 stay up all the time. And then from the bowsprit, I'm flying 2 code sails, an upwind one and a downwind one. And then I've got 2 soft spinnakers in snuffers.
So to understand sails, the first thing we need is, of course, a sailing boat. So I'm going to draw one that is quite symbolic, let's say. So all of this is not the scale, but basically we have the mast here. And so I'm going to stick to a sloop design right here, which basically means that you have 2 sails. And so generally on the front and back of the boat we have some stays. And then, you know, sometimes we have, on most of the markets of course, we have one of those things that stick out, yes, a bowsprit as they're called. And so the sails are quite easily understood because the names really relate to sizes, yes. And so the biggest sails that all of the different boats are carrying are basically called spinnakers. Now that name is not quite accurate because there are just tons of different types of spinnakers. But basically you can recognize a spinnaker, or you know, a downwind sail, they're also often called, by the fact that they're kind of not really attached to anything on the boat except for on top here on the mast, or sometimes a little bit lower, but mostly on top of the mast, and they kind of freely, very round, very big, and usually they attach somewhere far in the back of the boat, sometimes even all the way to the back. And so the rest of them are like shaped like this, really far back, something like this, but sometimes even further, so it might go as far back as this and then attached. So then, after the spinnakers, we have sails that we call A's, and A's are basically genoas, and so generally they're attached, depends a little bit, but they're usually attached to the forestay, and they're quite big, and they're usually 120 or 130, sometimes even 140%, but the main aspect, the main thing that distinguishes an A from a J or a spinnaker is that, so attached to the forestay, to that line there that keeps the mast up basically, and their size is beyond the mast. So if the mast is here, they're longer towards the end of the ship than the mast, and so their shape might be something like that, and then they attach somewhere into the cockpit there. And so an A1 is usually the biggest genoa that a boat is carrying, is usually 120, sometimes 130 or 140%. They're quite large. Then we have the A2, which is the Genoa 2, which is basically more or less the same sail, but it's a little shorter, but it still comes further back than the mast. Now, depending on what boat you can do, there can be like an endless number of A's, so you can have an A1, A2, A3, A4. You can separate this into as many A's as you want, because every boat is different, and so depending on the preferences of the captain of the sailing team, you can cut these sails at any exact percentages all around the, so you have like 100% of genoas, and you can put them, you know, 1% further than the mast, or 10% or 20 or 30, and you can make any choice really in there to try to make your boat have the right speed. If you look at my boat, for example, I carry an A2. It's my standard sail that I have, you know, set on the front of my boat. And I have an A1, so I actually own one, but I have it in storage. I actually don't carry it on my boat because I never really use it. Like, I've had it on my boat for 2 years, and I just found out that I never hoisted it, I think maybe only once, just to kind of try it out and actually see it in action. Because generally I have a spinnaker, so I have one of these really big sails, And when there's low wind, I just use the really big spinnaker. And if the wind is a little bit stronger, I always switch right away to the A2. So the A1, I kind of always skip it because there's just no need for me to make the smalls just a little bit smaller to the A1. I usually go quite a step. So between the spinnaker and the A2, it's a bit of a bigger size difference. But in general, I find that size difference quite nice because I can use the spinnaker to a point, and when I drop the spinnaker, it's usually perfect weather for the A2, and the A1 is also just a little bit too large. So I have a spinnaker and an A1. Then we have another series of head sails that we call jibs. So I'll take another color for that. Let's work with green. And jibs are the same in the sense that they're also attached to the front stay, but they're shorter than the mast. So a maximum jib ends right before the mast, and that's why they are kind of practical, because they're smaller, so for stronger winds, but also when you're tacking or jibing and you have to drag your head sail from one side of the boat to the other, it's much easier to tack or jibe over a jib sail, so a J1 or J2 or J3. J is just short for jib, because there's nothing in this triangle, which is called the fore triangle of the boat, to kind of get in the way of the sail. So when you're trying to pull over a genoa, it will kind of maybe slam into your mast or drag a little bit because it's so much longer than this distance between the nose of the boat and the mast, while the jib never crosses the mast, so it doesn't interfere with that. And so then we have the jib 2, which is generally a bit smaller again, sometimes even jib 3, which is sometimes already called the storm jib. And so all of these J's just get smaller, and you can go on with that kind of endlessly. And when you look good at the boats in the Vendee, you will also see that many of the boats have not just one forestay, so here, but they have actually 2 or sometimes even 3 of those. And so in general, they will take the genoas or the A's, and they will fly those on the front, on the stay that is most in the front. Yes, and then they have other stays here, so they're called baby stays or cutter stays. There are different names for it depending on the number of stays that you have. But basically, these stays allow the sailors in the Vendee to put additional jibs. So sometimes you will see a boat sailing with, for example, an A2 on. So, not the largest A that they have, but like say the second size, but they're also flying here a little, what they call a cutter jib. Yes, or maybe they're flying it here, and so they often have different options, and these stays are generally removable. So my boat, for example, also has one inner stay, so a cutter stay, to change my boat kind of into a cutter rig, and it's removable, so I can take it away and just hook it here so it's out of the way, and I can, for example, when I go upwind, very easily switch over the jib, when I'm solo sailing, for example, to make everything a bit more easy. But if I want to have a lot of downwind power and I would like to add a additional front sail in there, then I can simply hook up the stay, tighten it, and I can put an extra sail in there. And so those are basically the sails that we're talking about the most. So we have the main, which is of course here, it's attached to the boom. Then we have the genoas, Genoa 1, 120, 130, 140% generally. Then we have Genoa 2, so that's A1 for the Genoa 1, and A2 for Genoa 2, which is a bit shorter, so that's maybe 110, 115% compared to the A1. Then we have Jib 1, which is, just beyond the mast. Jib 2, a bit smaller, and jib 3 sometimes even more smaller. And then we have cutter jibs or storm jibs or other sails that we kind of attach to the optional stays that the boats also have. And so the sailors in the Vendee are constantly making a decision to either put up more sail or less sail depending on the amount of wind they are. And the process of making the sails smaller, in sailing we call that process reefing. And so the mainsail generally has 3, sometimes 4 areas where they have a system here, usually with lines that run kind of through the boom. And if they want to make this sail smaller, they will pull it down. So they will take one of these kind of areas and they will harmonic it together on the boom, lowering the sail so it becomes smaller, or lowering it again so it becomes even smaller. And they generally have 3 or sometimes 4 moments, points in the sail where they can do that. Now for the head sails, that's a little bit more complicated. So on a commercial boat, you can often roll them up. And the guys in the Vendee can also do that to some extent. But most of the time, if they want to make a sail smaller, they have to take it off and actually put on a different sail. Especially with the sails in here. They're not really, most of them, reefable on the furlers that they have. Because that's not really what those systems are suited for, because they're racing. And furling up a sail partially really ruins the shape of it. So in racing we generally like to use full sails and we just exchange the sail for another sail.
I've got to go and sort out the mess on the bow. I'll take you to show it to see. So you got the Janica. It is strapped on, which is dropped in haste to put up the spinnaker. And there she is. Next mission, now the spinnaker's up, is to sort out this. This is the sock up and down line. So, and then I've got to get this Janica into a bag. That's the next mission.
Now you know A1, A2, J1, J2, J3, and cutter sails, cutter jibs in the middle, and the main. And so that's basically all of the sails. Now then for spares, so most of the boats in the Vendee Globe, they're allowed to have 8 sails on board. So whatever they do, they have their own choice. So most of the boats have a sail wardrobe on land that is an A1 and an A2, and sometimes 4 or 5 different spinnakers that are all cut a little bit different in order to be better for certain times of wind directions. But for the Vendee, they're only allowed 8 sails. So before they set ahead, they have to make a choice. And like me, when I sail, not in the Vendee, but when I sail on my own boat, I also have about, I would say, 10 sails in total with my boat. So different spinnakers, different A's, different J's. But when I'm sailing, I'm generally only carrying 4 or 5, because the situations that I'm sailing in general, I never will really need more than 5. And yeah, it's just more practical. It saves a lot of weight. So, I don't carry all of the sails with me. And in the Vendee Globe, it's the same thing. To carry weight, they will all try to bring as few sails as possible, because sails are really, really heavy. But they will take all the sails that they think they will need. So I hope this little introduction made things a little bit more easy for those of you to understand who, maybe were not so familiar with that yet. For those who already knew, please be patient. There are many people on this channel, some who know a lot, some who know not so much. So, let's give each other some time also to learn sometimes. And yeah, that's basically it for today's update. Looking forward to tomorrow. Hope that, everything stays in one piece, and that we see hopefully maybe Alex's lead increase a little bit. No definite news on Chirel, by the way, so I guess we're probably going to really know by tomorrow, maybe hopefully hear something on what the status is there. Until then, see you guys all tomorrow.